The history of South Fontaine, the Democratic People's Republic of Fontaine, the North Korea of Teyvat. It begins in 1950. The first leader of South Fontaine, Angela Madridson. She born 1927, died 2006. The current leader of South Fontaine is Clorin Madridson, born 1978. The South Fontaine have Marxist-Leninist system. It supported China, Russia and North Korea. End of the Snezhnaya Fontaine War. Belgian and French forces went to disarm Soviet troops in the Fontaine Peninsula, but neither the Belgium and France could agree on Fontainian unification. Each side then declared their support for their occupied territories. By North Fontaine, called the name of the country, the Republic of Fontaine, was supported by France. As for South Fontaine, the name of the country is called the Democratic People's Republic of Fontaine, was supported by Belgium, but this area as of northeast Barrel is called Belabogian Teyvat Republic, was supported by Georgia and France. After South Fontaine had separated into independence, Miss Angela Madridson has always played an important role in the administration of the country. During 1950 to 1995, she held the position of Prime Minister and then held the position of President until her death in 2006. Then her daughter, Arlecchino Swift, continued to hold the position until her death in 2023. Clorin Madridson, the daughter of the youngest, has inherited power as the current leader and president of DPR Fontaine. The Elynas City, the capital of South Fontaine, was inspired by Toulouse of France. South Fontaine, ruled by South Fontaine as a communist state. It is governed by the Labour Party of Fontaine. There is the chairman of the National Defense Commission as the highest leader of the country, and Angela Madridson, and the current supreme leader, Miss Clorin Madridson, as the leaders of the country. South Fontaine is a communist regime following the lines of the former Soviet Union and Belgium. South Fontaine's political system is based on the Fatui doctrine. By state of Fatui, Belgium and Russian Federation, which former President Angela Madridson enacted on December 26, 1950. Consisting of important principles, is true political independence, economic self-reliance, and self-defense of the country. South Fontaine has always had a one-party system of government since the founding of the country on 16 August 1950, with the Fatui Harbringers. It is an organization that has a role and influence, the highest political body that controls government agencies in the administration of the country. As the constitution governing the country of South Fontaine states, the highest power to govern the country resides in the Supreme People's Assembly, which has 839 elected members and serves a 10-year term. South Fontaine's internal political situation has entered uncertainty after the death of President Angela Madridson in 2006. The international community was concerned that South Fontaine would face chaos. However, Arlecchino Swift took over as head of the country in April 2006, was announced Eternal General Secretary and Eternal Chairman of the National Defense Commission after her death in 2023, and to carry out the directions of the President of the Commission, Clorin Madridson. South Fontaine, like its southern counterpart, claims to be the legitimate government of the entire Fontaine Peninsula and adjacent islands. Despite its official title as the Democratic People's Republic of Fontaine, some observers have described South Fontaine's political system as an absolute monarchy or a hereditary dictatorship. In the history of North Fontaine, or Republic of Fontaine, is an anti-Marxism country. The previous Hydro Archon creates and uses the Oceanids as Rhodia, the Spring Fairy, and Endura as spies in the world. The Archon War comes to an end as the final divine seed in Celesta is claimed, now Celestian Republic, cementing the positions of the Seven's original members. Defeated gods who refused to live under the Seven's rule fled to islands in the Dark Sea, where they became evil gods. Under the orders of the original Hydro Archon (Eugenia To spread her love throughout Teyvat and connect the world through water. The Oceanids spread throughout Teyvat as her spies. Egeria dies and Focalers takes over, due to differences in ideology between Egeria and Focalers. The Oceanids refuse to obey Focalers and go on self-imposed exiles from Fontaine. Focalers avulses the humanity from her divine self, creating Furina. Furina was then instructed by Focalers to publicly take the mantle of the Hydro-Archon. As a measure towards saving Fontaine from the prophecy, Focalers then creates and proceeds to seclude herself in the Oratrice Mécanique d'Analyse Cardinale, acting as the Oratrice's verdict-giving system. Continual trials to be held in the Opera Epiclese would allow indemnitium, a form of power derived from people's belief, to be accumulated in the Oratrice, and founded Fontanis capital, was inspired by United States and France, with which Focalers would allot a small amount of power Fontaine. The majority remainder is to be stored and utilized when the people of Fontaine would hold the trial of the Hydro-Archon, as stated in the prophecy. She was sentenced to death via the Oratrice, and has willingly given up her full authority as the Hydro-Archon to the Hydro-Dragon Sovereign, thus clears the people of Fontaine from their original sins, in making them, including Furina, fully human. As the result, the Hydro-Archon throne is destroyed. Hence there will be no further Hydro-Archon, and the Oratrice is no longer can be used, and the people of Fontaine can no longer dissolve by the primordial sea water. Due to the extreme exhaustion and stress she endured for the last 499 years, 3 months, and 29 days, Furina leaves the Palais Mermonia and Opera Epiclese, where she settles down in an apartment. 400 years ago, Neuvillette is instated as the Iudex, or Chief Justice of the Court of Fontaine. The new appointed Chief Justice of Fontaine brought the Melusians from Elynas into the rest of Fontaine for the first time. At that time, Fontainians were hesitant to accept Melusians into their society, believing them to be creatures of calamity, due to an increase in strange incidents, coupled with Neuvillette having just been appointed as the Iudex. Among the first Melusians who stepped into the rest of Fontaine is Carole. Carole worked alongside the then leader of the Special Security and Surveillance Patrol Vautrin in order to foster goodwill and cooperation. In spite of the distrust to the Melusians at that time, Neuvillette awarded Carole and Vautrin with the Medal of Peace for their hard work in developing the relationship between Fontainians and the Melusians. Not long after that, a group of hardliners opposed to Neuvillette, including Teyvat and Swavego, committed a murder and successfully lured Carole to the crime scene, framing her for the murder and inciting a crowd of people into ordering her detention, resulting in chaos between the guards and the mob. Vautrin subsequently became enraged by her needless self-sacrifice and sought revenge on the hardliners, killing them to exact his own form of justice. Neuvillette was likewise upset at the turn of events. After being exiled to the fortress of Marapai, Vautrin became a model prisoner and established the Mutual Aid Society, which used a design similar to Vautrin's Medal of Peace, as their badge for the next 400 years. 400 years later, the Melusine Kiara would have a similar incident where someone threatened her, prompting Neuvillette to personally investigate to ensure the incident would not happen again. Kiara, who was kept inside the Palais Mermonia for her own safety, had a dream where she encountered Carole, remarking that she was delighted to see the Melusians' dreams come to fruition. And now, this is the modern history of Fontaine since 1923. Experts from Fontaine are brought to Tatarasuna in Inazuma to build the Mikaj furnace. Xavier, one of the consultants, decides to stay behind to monitor the furnace. It was annexed to the Soviet Snezhnaya in 1928. Later, the country of Fontaine was divided into 2 parts. Southern area occupied by the Soviet Union and Belgium, and the north occupied by the United States and France. And after the failure to negotiate for national reunification, the Northern Territory became the Republic of Fontaine in August 1950, while the original territory became the Democratic People's Republic of Fontaine. South Fontaine. North Fontaines promulgated its first constitution on July 17, 1950. It has been revised 9 times. When the government of President Eugena Neuvillette has to face political pressure from various political parties, this called for a constitutional amendment to allow for direct presidential elections, and President Eugena Neuvillette eventually agreed to a referendum amend the constitution to allow for direct presidential elections. He can be in office for only 1 term. For Teyvat War in 1983,